I'm Jennifer Stevens. I'm a journalist and a mum of two. It's really strange being here today, actually, because it's almost exactly 2 years since I was last here. My daughter is 2 next week. I had both my daughters here, one in 2018 and one in 2020. But for the 4 years before that, I was here an awful lot because I had 4 miscarriages in a row, 3 of them in the care of the Rotunda. My first miscarriage was very early, and I knew the information about 1 in 4 or 1 in 5 pregnancies end in miscarriage, so I was quite calm about it. I thought it was one of those things that might happen, and I picked myself up and went again. Then my second one happened, and my third one. My fourth finished with a D&C the day before Christmas Eve in 2016, which, as you can imagine, was incredibly hard, but it wasn't the worst miscarriage I had experienced. I think my third was. When I had my fourth, I was under the care of the Miscarriage Clinic and Dr. Karen Flood, and I felt really supported and looked after, and I thought that we would get through it and find a way to have a baby in the end. I really appreciated being part of the Miscarriage Clinic. My third miscarriage, I was admitted to the Rotunda, and then I was sent home to miscarry, which was difficult in itself. But when I came back from my checkups, my HCG levels hadn't dropped, and I had to keep coming back for blood tests. I attended the EPU, the early pregnancy unit, for those, and I came week after week, which was really difficult. There was a midwife there who I don't think I'll ever forget her as long as I live. She did my blood tests every week, and one week she told me that her son was at home sick, and when I asked her why she wasn't at home with them, she said, "Oh, but I knew you were coming in, and I didn't want you to have to explain it to anybody else, so I came in to see you, and I'm going to go now." And I couldn't believe that somebody would do that and look after you like that. She was amazing. But she was the person who told me about the Miscarriage Clinic and that I could be referred on there. And she gave me Patricia's number, who was the midwife that looked after Karen's patients. And I rang her, and again, she was just the loveliest woman. And she said, "Oh, please, come on in. I'll make an appointment. You're going to come in and meet Karen," which I did. And they spoke to me, explained everything that happened to me so far, and explained what they would do, how they would take over from there. And they really, really minded me. On my second and third miscarriages, I was admitted to a ward. They weren't happy with what they could see on the scans, and they wanted to do more investigations. And I was really scared. I didn't know what was going on. I didn't know what was going to happen. And on my second miscarriage, I didn't ask enough questions. I just let what was going to happen. And I went home a little confused, not sure what had gone on, not sure what was going to happen next, and still quite scared. When I came back from my third miscarriage, I had a list of questions, and I made sure to advocate for myself. I didn't think anybody else could speak up and ask the questions that needed to be asked except for me. And I had a list on my phone. And when the consultant came on his rounds to see me, I think he was surprised. I stopped him, and I had things that I wanted to know, that I definitely wanted to know. And he was more than happy to answer them. I don't think they always get asked all the questions. You know, you're in shock, and you're confused, and you're scared, and they're probably used to you just accepting what's happening. But because it was my third, I wasn't going to let that happen. And I think that having those questions was really helpful, and it changed my care. And one of the reasons I'm so happy to do this today and so happy to have written about miscarriage is that if people are more armed with information and with the facts, they can advocate for themselves better. They can have a list of questions. They can know what they want to know from a consultant or a midwife or the person that they see first. They can ask for the things that they would like to happen. And when people don't speak about miscarriage enough, and when there's silence around it, you couldn't possibly know what questions you should ask. So this is really important and really helpful. On my 5th pregnancy, I went back to the miscarriage clinic and was scanned immediately, and my weekly appointments were made. And I was given all the same care I was given on my 4th pregnancy, which miscarried. So I had aspirin and progesterone and Karen's care and Patricia there. And week after week I went in and I saw my scans and I saw the baby, and everything was going really well. And we got to the week that I miscarried on my 4th pregnancy, and I was terrified again, even though everything seemed fine. And after that appointment, we felt a little more confident. And I think Karen could see that. And so the next week, everything was still fine. And the next week we were fine. And we got to about 13 weeks, and Karen said, "You don't need to be here anymore. You can progress on now." I remember we looked at each other. We couldn't speak. My husband and I we couldn't speak. And we were nodding at her. And she said, "Do you want to come and see me?" And we were like, yes, we don't want anybody else. And so we carried on our care with Karen and ended up having baby May in 2018. And when I was pregnant then in 2019 with Molly, Karen was the first person we rang. She was like, come straight in. And having her with us the whole way along, knowing what we had been through, was really important. She knew when we were freaking out, and she knew when we were delighted and everything was fine, and she felt like our friend. But I had 2 planned sections on the girls, and when I had my first one, I was brought down to the waiting area of surgery, which is where I was brought to have my D&C 2 years before. And I don't think I was prepared for how difficult that would be and how emotional it would be. And there was an anaesthetist there called Anne who came to talk to me, and she could see that I was, on the verge of losing it. And she got down on her knees in front of me and said, "We're here for all of the other babies that didn't get this far, and we're really going to mind you. And in about an hour, you're going to have a little girl." And she asked me, "Do we have a name?" And I said, "Her name is May." And she said, "In about an hour, you're going to be back out here with May in your arms." And she held my hand for the entire time I was in there. And she did a little dance of joy when she was born. And she made it the most incredible day, the most incredible morning. And they were all amazing. I think miscarriage is a really difficult subject for family and friends to broach, and it is really hard to know what to say. Often just being there is enough, and saying, "I know you're really sad and I'm really sorry." We're very quick to say, "Sure, you can get pregnant. That's the main thing." And it may not be the main thing at all. "Sure, I was always pregnant. That wasn't the problem." Or, "You'll have your babies," or "Just keep trying." And it's probably not helpful at that point. And I know you want to say something to help, but really holding a hand and making a cup of tea and sitting in silence with somebody can be enough. I think people forget the dads an awful lot. And it's devastating for them as well. And people expect them to bounce back really quickly and be okay, but they've lost their baby as much as the woman has lost her baby, and giving them time and the space to talk about it is so important. I think we often clap men on the back and say, sure, you'll be grand, and how's she? Is she okay? Without asking how he is. And maybe acknowledging that it was his baby too is a really important thing to do. A couple loses a baby.